Some things on the internet are not meant to be found. They lurk in the shadows.
I wasn't supposed to notice the pattern. Not at first. Back then, these were just stories, local rumors, campfire nonsense people whispered when the night got too quiet. I collected them the way some people collect old postcards or dead things in jars. It was harmless. At least, it felt harmless. I'd hear a story, write it down, maybe record a retelling if it was strange enough to keep me up that night. But lately, I've been going back through them, one by one, and something isn't right. It's not just the details that overlap or the dates that don't line up. It's the names, the voices, the way some of them remember things that never happened or shouldn't have. I don't even know when it started. The 10th story, maybe. That's when I realized the same phrase kept showing up in all of them. Different people, different towns, but the same exact words. I checked the audio files again last week, and that's when I heard it for myself. My own voice, saying something I don't remember recording. If you're still listening, it's already too late. Don't skip ahead. Don't rewind. Just listen. These stories weren't meant to be told together. Separately, they're just strange little coincidences. Together, they start to make sense, and that's the problem. Once you start connecting them, you can't stop. Something starts to notice that you're noticing. One of these stories doesn't match any official record. In fact, it shouldn't exist at all, but it does. Somehow. I don't know how far this goes or what it wants. I just know that once I started hearing the pattern, the nights got longer and the silence started breathing. The first report was easy to dismiss. That's why it worked. I live in a place where everyone knows everyone, or at least we're supposed to. A stretch of farmland, a few houses spaced far enough apart that privacy feels natural, not lonely. My neighbor's name was Mark. He brought over tomatoes every summer, waved every morning, and once helped me fix a fence without even asking why it was broken. The first time something fell off was small. So small I ignored it. I was taking out the trash when I heard Mark call my name from across the yard. "Hey," he said, dragging the word out, friendly as always. I waved back and asked how he was doing. "Doing," he replied. I laughed, assuming he was distracted. "Yeah, doing what?" "Doing what?" he repeated. Same tone, same rhythm, a beat too late. I remember thinking it was odd, but people have off days. The next morning, he knocked on my door. I opened it, expecting his usual easy smile. Instead, he just stood there, head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something behind me. "You okay?" I asked. "You okay?" he said back. Not mocking, not joking, just flat. I felt a chill then. Not fear exactly. More like the discomfort of talking to someone who wasn't fully present. When I told him he could come in, he stepped forward, stopped at the threshold, and waited. Too long. As if he expected something else to happen. "Mark," I said. He blinked. "Mark," he answered. After that, it escalated slowly. He'd repeat my sentences word for word, but the emotions never matched. If I joked, he stayed neutral. If I sounded worried, he smiled. Once, when I told him my mother was sick, he nodded and said, "That's good," in a voice that tried very hard to sound sympathetic. The community stayed warm. Barbecues, laughter, kids riding bikes down dirt roads. No one else seemed to notice anything wrong. And Mark stayed close, always watching, always listening. I started avoiding him, changing my routines, leaving lights on at night. Still, he'd show up, standing in places he shouldn't have been able to hear me from. Once, I caught him repeating a conversation I'd had alone hours earlier. That was when I realized he wasn't learning from me. He was recording, practicing, waiting. One night, I heard his voice outside my bedroom window. "I need help," it said. Perfectly. My own voice. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't sleep. By morning, his house was empty. No car. No furniture. No dust where furniture should have been. No signs anyone had ever lived there at all. When I asked around, people looked confused. Some laughed it off. One woman checked county records and told me gently that there had never been a Mark living next door. No utility bills. No property deed. Nothing. It was like he'd been erased carefully, intentionally, that I didn't meet him in the woods. That's the part people get wrong. I met him behind a ranger station, over burnt coffee and a cigarette he wasn't supposed to have. He told me his name, then immediately told me not to write it down. Names travel, he said, and smiled like that was a joke. He'd been a park ranger for 12 years. Federal land, remote trails, places where radios lose signal and sound doesn't behave right. He said there were rules they followed that never made it into training manuals. Not laws, not safety guidelines, rules. And if you asked why, you were told to stop asking. Rule 3 is the reason I stopped hiking, he said. Rule 1 was simple. Never answer a call you didn't hear start. If someone calls your name from the trees and you didn't see them arrive, you keep walking. You don't respond. You don't look back. He said the people who did usually thought they recognized the voice. A friend, a spouse, sometimes themselves. Rule 2 contradicted the first. If you hear footsteps following you, you stop immediately and announce yourself out loud. He said whatever's behind you needs confirmation. Silence invites curiosity. Curiosity invites practice. Become human. He said animals don't switch gaits mid-stride. And if you notice bare feet where there were hooves before, you're already late. There was a rule he wouldn't say. He started to, then crossed it out on the napkin he'd been writing on so hard it nearly tore. I asked him what happened. He shook his head and said, "That rule got someone killed. No name, no story, just that." He laughed once while explaining it all, a dry sound without humor. Said some rangers lasted months, some years, some vanished between shift changes. Paperwork always blamed weather or poor judgment. Never patterns, never repetition. When I asked who enforced the silence, he shrugged. Silence enforces itself, he said. He told me radios sometimes played voices from previous weeks, calling for help that had already failed. He told me supervisors pretended not to hear it. He told me the land doesn't like being watched too closely, and it learns the watchers faster than they expect. He crushed his cigarette into the dirt and said the rules weren't protection, just delays. Enough time to walk away. Enough time to forget faces. Enough time to stay human. Then he told me never to test which rules were lies, because something was listening closely now. I didn't believe him then. Years later, I saw those same rules posted anonymously online, tied to a forest thousands of miles away. And that's when I stopped pretending it was coincidence that IT was supposed to be a harmless road trip. 3 friends, 1 long weekend, and a beat-up car that smelled like gasoline and fast food. We were chasing nothing in particular, just the kind of freedom you feel when you drive far enough that your phone stops working. The last stop on our list was a reservation road we weren't supposed to take. A local at a gas station told us it was closed after dark, that the hills remember what you shouldn't. We laughed it off. Young, dumb, and convinced we were invincible. Remember how loud the car was at first. Music, jokes, candy wrappers crinkling, the rhythm of the road. It felt like summer should. But then the radio started cutting out. Just static, not total silence. It almost sounded like someone breathing through the interference. "Turn that off," Emma said. "It's creepy." "Relax," I told her. "It's just signal bounce." "Then why's it saying your name?" she asked. It wasn't, of course. At least, I thought it wasn't. Then the static repeated a word in a flat, perfect copy of her voice. "Stop." We went quiet after that. For a while, we convinced ourselves it was just nerves. We reached a turn where the road narrowed and trees pressed closer. That's when Jacob saw it. Something standing by the ditch. Human shape, wrong posture. We passed it fast, but I caught a glimpse in the side mirror. It looked like someone wearing a person, not being one. We didn't stop again until we hit a motel an hour away. Cheap room, humming neon, and walls thin enough to hear every other guest breathing. None of us mentioned what we saw. Jacob tried to joke about it once, said maybe it was a scarecrow, but his laugh never finished. That night, someone knocked on our door. 3 slow knocks, like the rhythm of a question. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. But the air felt heavy, like we were underwater. When I turned back, Emma was whispering to herself, over and over, "Don't answer it." It knocked again, slower this time. We left before sunrise, didn't even check out. By daylight it all seemed stupid. We blamed exhaustion. We blamed stories. But when we got home, things started moving on their own, small things. A chair, my keys, footsteps outside the window. I tried to ignore it until the night I heard scratching at my bedroom door. Not violent, gentle, patient, like it knew I was awake. I stayed still until morning. When I opened the door, there were 5 long marks etched into the wood. They weren't deep, but they were fresh. I moved out 2 days later. I still talk to Emma sometimes, though Jacob won't answer anymore. She says she keeps her windows covered now, even during the day. She says if you pretend not to notice it, it loses interest. I try to believe her, but sometimes I wake up thinking I heard that same knock again. 3 slow taps, perfectly spaced, and I wonder if noticing is exactly what it wanted all along. I shouldn't have told you that part. You listened too closely. Now I can't help but wonder how many of you have already made the same mistake. Don't ask me how the recording survived. It wasn't supposed to. All I know is that the call starts in the middle, like someone pressed play too late. Please remain calm, the dispatcher says. Her voice is steady, professional. Tell me what's happening. I already did, the caller replies. You're going to ask me where I am next. There's a pause. You can hear her inhale before speaking. Where are you right now? 3rd floor, the voice answers. You'll write that down, then you'll ask if I'm safe. Are you safe? She asks, quieter now. No, the caller says. But you won't send anyone. Not yet. That's when the dispatcher finally breaks protocol. She asks how he knows what she's about to say. The caller laughs, but the sound is wrong. Not distorted, not glitching. Just empty, like someone copying laughter without understanding why people laugh. I've heard you practice, he says. You all sound the same after a while. The official story says the call ended there, that the line went dead and the dispatcher filed a report marked equipment malfunction. But years later, someone posted a transcript online that didn't match the report. I saw it once before it disappeared again. The last part of the call wasn't included in any public record. In the leaked version, the dispatcher starts to cry. She asks the caller what he wants. He answers by repeating her words back to her, but softer, like he's trying them on. What do you want? She says. What do you want? He echoes. Then, in her exact voice, he adds, help me. The recording cuts to silence for 3 full seconds. When sound returns, it's the dispatcher again, but she isn't speaking to him anymore. She's speaking to herself. I can hear myself, she whispers. I'm still talking, but it's not me. There's a final click. End of file. After I found the transcript, I started looking for similar reports. I didn't find any official ones. What I found instead were fragments. Comments that vanished. Audio clips that lost their metadata. Stories that ended right before the important part. It felt intentional, like someone was trimming the evidence just enough to keep it from forming a shape. Some nights, when I replay the audio, I swear the pauses grow longer. Not louder, not clearer, just longer, as if whatever was on the line is still listening, still waiting for the next question it already knows the answer to. I tried to verify it, tried to track down the dispatcher, but her name was sealed. All I found was a single comment on an old forum thread. Someone claiming to be her brother said she quit that same week. Wouldn't use the phone anymore. Wouldn't answer her own voicemail. He said she told him something had learned her voice faster than she learned how to be afraid. I keep thinking about how many calls like that never get leaked, never get questioned, never even get remembered. That was the first case that made me realize these things don't just watch us. And once they start learning, they never slow down again. They practice. And every time someone listens too closely, they get better than before that I don't remember deciding to take that road. One moment we were driving through empty stretches of highway. The next we were slowing down in front of a sign that didn't look new or old, just undecided. The paint wasn't peeling, but it wasn't fresh either. It said, "Welcome back," even though I was, like a stage set waiting behind a curtain. Neat houses, clean streets, the kind of place that looks peaceful in photographs, but strangely flat in person. Everyone we passed smiled. Not friendly smiles. Practiced ones. The kind you give when you know you're being watched. We stopped at a small diner. Red booths. White coffee cups. The server looked at me and said, "You're early this time." "I think you've got me confused with someone else," I told her. She tilted her head. "You always say that." The menu hadn't changed since the last time, she claimed. The pie was still my favorite, she said. I didn't order it. As we walked through town, I noticed symbols carved into fence posts and lamp poles. The same crooked shape, over and over again. I'd seen it before. Once, in a ranger's notebook. Once again, scribbled in the margin of a story about a missing man who'd followed voices into the woods. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to admit how familiar it felt. Every person we spoke to insisted I'd been there before. They remembered my questions. They remembered my hesitation. One man said I'd left in a hurry last time. Another said I promised to come back when I was ready to listen. The shadows were wrong. They leaned away from the sun instead of toward it. I watched my own stretch across the sidewalk and bend in a direction I wasn't facing. When I stopped walking, it kept going. That's when I realized we weren't exploring the town. The town was exploring us. We stayed less than an hour. Long enough for the smiles to feel heavier. Long enough for the air to thicken. When we finally drove away, I looked back and saw the sign again. It didn't say "Welcome back" anymore. It said, "Don't forget." I tried to look the place up later. No map showed it. No record listed it. Even the road we took seemed to vanish between satellite images, like it had never been meant to stay in one place too long. Weeks passed, then months. I thought I'd imagined it all until I found the symbol again, scratched into the side of my apartment door. Not deep. Just enough to be noticed by someone who knew to look. I asked the others if they felt it too, that strange sense of being remembered by people we'd never met. They laughed it off at first, but later that night, in the motel miles away, none of us slept. We all kept waking at the same time, just after 2 a.m, convinced we'd heard someone whisper our names through the walls. The clerk swore no one else was staying there. Still, I found the same symbol carved into the ice machine, into the stair rail, into the back of my notebook, drawn in my own handwriting without any memory of doing it. That's when the pattern stopped feeling like paranoia. Some places don't appear to everyone. Some stories don't either. I think that town only shows itself to people who are already being watched. People who've heard the wrong voices, followed the wrong signs, listened to one too many warnings they weren't meant to hear. That was when I finally understood. This wasn't coincidence anymore. Yet.at this point, I need to stop pretending these are just stories. If you've listened this far, you've probably felt it too, that uneasy sense that some details keep echoing across different accounts. Different places, different years, same phrases, same mistakes, same moment when someone realizes they noticed something they weren't supposed to. I won't explain the rules, not because I don't want to, but because I don't think they stay the same once you hear them. Every time someone tries to define what's happening, the pattern shifts just enough to stay ahead. What I can say is this: the stories always start in ordinary places. Kitchens, roads, ranger stations, bedrooms. Normal life is the camouflage. Horror only works when it borrows something familiar first. Maybe you've already spotted the connections, the voices that repeat, the way attention seems to invite imitation, the way official records never quite match what people remember. If one of these stories felt too familiar, not just scary but personal, I want you to tell me which one it was. Not for curiosity, for warning. Because there is one story I wasn't supposed to share. I found it buried between redacted pages and corrupted files, marked with a note that simply said, "Do not continue." I didn't listen. I never do when someone tells me not to look. That story changes everything. It explains why some people vanish from records instead of from places. It explains why certain voices sound closer at night. And it explains why collecting these accounts was never neutral. Some of you will think this is just storytelling. I wish it were. But patterns don't form by accident, and coincidences don't repeat themselves this cleanly, unless something is guiding where they appear on purpose always. Before that, you need to hear what happened to the people who tried to stop it. I first found his work in a forgotten corner of an online archive, buried between grant proposals and papers no one cited anymore. His name showed up on studies about folklore psychology, mass hysteria, the way belief reshapes memory. He treated monsters like data points, not threats. That was his first mistake. When I finally spoke to him, he laughed about it, said the real danger wasn't creatures in the woods, it was superstition in people's heads. He recorded everything: conversations, field interviews, his own thoughts, spoken into a handheld recorder late at night. He called it documentation. I called it bait. At first, his notes were clinical. Dates, locations, emotional responses. Then the tone shifted. He started redacting his own entries, blacking out sentences with thick marker like he was afraid of what he'd written. He joked about it in emails, said paranoia was just part of the research package. Academia pays you to doubt everything, he wrote. Accept yourself. He began to notice something strange. The more he documented certain stories, the more reports appeared that matched them. Not copies, evolutions, as if the idea itself was learning from being observed. When he tried to debunk one account publicly, 3 more surfaced within weeks, all with details he hadn't shared anywhere. That's when I realized skepticism wasn't protection, he told me. It's just another kind of attention. His recordings changed after that. Less laughter, more long silences. I listened to one file where he sat in his office, whispering, "Stop watching me learn," over and over again. Another ended with him saying, half joking, half afraid, "If this gets published, it's going to start answering back." Funding dried up soon after. Committees didn't like his conclusions. He became cynical, bitter, joked that the only thing scarier than cryptids was the paperwork required to study them. But he kept going anyway. Said he needed to finish before whatever he was tracking finished first. The last message I got from him was a comment he posted under an obscure forum thread about skinwalkers. Just one sentence. It changes faster when you stop believing it's real. 2 days later, his accounts went silent. His office was cleared out by people who wouldn't give their names. His recordings vanished. Even his archived papers started disappearing, replaced with error messages and broken links. A mutual colleague told me later that he'd started covering the camera on his laptop with tape, then paper, then books. Said it wasn't about privacy anymore. It was about slowing things down. Every time you look for it, the colleague said, it looks back a little harder. He stopped attending conferences, stopped answering calls, stopped leaving his apartment after sunset. And still, he claimed the footsteps outside his door sounded more confident every night. The last thing he ever told anyone was that denial had become the fastest way to invite something closer. Still, my brother died on a Tuesday. That detail shouldn't matter, but it does. Tuesdays were his favorite days to call, to check in, to pretend he wasn't lonely even when he clearly was. The funeral was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones and stays there. 3 months later, he came back. He showed up at my door with the same jacket, the same crooked smile, the same scar above his eyebrow. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stared at him like my brain was buffering, waiting for reality to reload. Hey, he said, you look tired. I let him in. At first, everything felt like a miracle I was afraid to touch. He remembered our childhood dog. He remembered the night we got lost driving home and slept in the car because we were too embarrassed to call for help. He even remembered my favorite cereal, the one I only ate when I couldn't sleep. But something was missing. Not a detail. A wait. At dinner that night, I asked him how he'd been feeling. Feeling, he said, then paused. Normal. You don't sound normal, I said, trying to joke. You don't sound normal, he replied, smiling a second too late. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. Our parents didn't notice at first. They were too busy being grateful, too busy pretending grief hadn't hollowed them out. When my brother told my mom he loved her, his voice was perfect. The words were right, but there was no tremble, no history behind them, just sound. One night, I sat across from him at the kitchen table. The clock ticked louder than it should have. Do you remember how scared you were before surgery? I asked. Yes, he said. What did you say to me that morning? He hesitated, not like someone searching memory, like someone waiting for a cue. You told me I'd be fine. That's what I said to you. I whispered. He nodded. That's what you said to me. I stopped eating. After that, I started watching him the way you watch a stranger in your house. He copied laughter but never started it. He mirrored sadness but never asked why. Once, when I cried in my room, I heard him outside the door repeating the sound softly, like he was practicing grief. The worst part wasn't fear. It was hope. Hope kept telling me to ignore the gaps, to fill them in myself. Some nights I caught him standing in front of the bathroom mirror, studying his own reflection like it was a mask he wasn't sure how to wear. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was remembering how to look right. That was the moment I understood something was learning how to be my brother, not becoming him. The choice came quietly. No dramatic moment. Just a night when he stood in the hallway, looking at me with my brother's eyes and something else behind them. Am I doing it right? He asked. I didn't answer. That's when I realized love isn't what brings people back. It's what makes you let them stay, even when they shouldn't. I waited weeks before telling anyone this story. I kept thinking if I stayed silent, maybe it would fade. Maybe he would too. I kept rewriting this part, hoping distance would make it safer to say. I even considered never telling it. Silence felt easier. I was wrong about that part too. He didn't. And that's why I delayed releasing this at Amy. Uncle taught me how to hunt before he taught me how to drive. Out here, you learn early that survival isn't just about skill, it's about silence. Hunters don't trade ghost stories the way city people do. They trade looks, pauses, the kind of half sentences that end before they should. The first time I noticed it, we were sitting around a fire after a long day in the woods. Someone mentioned a strange noise they'd heard near the tree line. The conversation died instantly. No laughter, no questions, just the crackle of burning wood and the sound of men pretending not to be uncomfortable. Later that night, my uncle pulled me aside. "Some things," he said, "you don't name." He told me there were words that worked like invitations. Not magic spells, not curses, just attention magnets. Say them out loud, and something somewhere starts listening closer. I thought he was messing with me until I met Tom. Tom was the kind of hunter who never shut up. Loud stories, louder opinions. He broke every unspoken rule just to prove he could. One night, after too many beers, he leaned back in his chair and said the name everyone avoided. Just once, just to show it didn't matter. The wind picked up immediately. Not a storm, not even a breeze. Just enough to make the trees whisper like they were repeating what he'd said. Tom laughed it off, but he stopped laughing when he heard footsteps outside his cabin that didn't belong to any animal he could name. He packed up before dawn and drove straight into town. 2 weeks later, he quit hunting altogether. When I asked him why, he told me something followed him home. Not in the dramatic way you see in movies. No chasing, no shadows in the headlights. Just a presence that stood a little too close in quiet rooms. A voice that tried to sound like people he trusted. He said it didn't hurt him. It studied him. After that, the silence among hunters made sense. It wasn't superstition. It was strategy. They didn't share stories because stories gave shape to things that preferred to stay undefined. If you're listening to this right now, do yourself a favor. Don't repeat the names you think you recognize. Don't test whether words really have power. Curiosity feels harmless until something answers it that I hesitated every time I thought about telling this story. Not because I was afraid of being judged, but because I knew some warnings only work if they stay unspoken. Once you turn them into sentences, they stop being protection and start becoming invitations. And still I kept writing, kept recording, kept pretending that attention only goes one way. I learned too late that silence is sometimes the only shield. There's one phrase they warn me about in particular. I was told never to say it out loud, not even as a joke. I almost didn't include it here. Almost that you're not alone, even now. That's what it said the first time I heard it. Not out loud, not exactly. More like the thought appeared in my head wearing a voice I trusted. I was sitting on my couch after midnight, lights off, phone face down, enjoying the quiet in the way only people who live alone understand. Silence felt safe, predictable, mine. Then the air shifted. Nothing dramatic, just a sense that the room was paying attention. You're not alone, even now. It said again, softer this time. I stood up, heart racing, and checked every corner of my apartment. Locked door, closed windows. No movement, no sound. I laughed at myself for being jumpy and went back to the couch. That's when I felt it sit beside me. Not physically, not with weight, with presence. The next few nights, it started helping. That's the part one hate admitting. When I felt anxious, the voice told me to breathe. When I couldn't sleep, it reminded me of songs I used to love. Once, when I cried, it whispered that everything would be okay in the exact tone my mother used when I was a kid. Comfort became the camouflage. I stopped calling friends. Stopped turning on the TV. I didn't need distraction anymore. I had company. It never showed itself. It never threatened me. It just stayed close. Always when I was alone. Always when I thought I needed someone most. If I walked into a crowded room, it vanished. If I picked up the phone, it went silent. Solitude was the invitation. One night, I decided to test it. I said out loud, "If you're really here, prove it." The voice hesitated. Then it said, "I already have." Form still hear it breathe between my thoughts. I think that's why this story works. Not because the thing is powerful, but because loneliness is. And because comfort is the easiest disguise anything could ever wear, I was told not to write this one down. Not by anyone official, not in a warning stamped across a file, just a quiet sentence from a man who wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it. Some stories, he told me, aren't meant to survive the telling. I didn't listen. I never do when someone sounds afraid instead of angry. This was the last account I collected, the one that made everything before it feel like preparation. He said there were rules, but not the kind people like to repeat online. Real rules. Ugly ones. Rules that changed depending on who was listening. He told me never to trust lists, because whatever we're dealing with learns faster than we organize. Still, he gave me a few, and every one of them contradicted something I'd already heard. First, he said never acknowledge it by name. Then he told me names don't matter, only intention does. He said running attracts attention, but so does standing still. He warned me not to look directly at it, then admitted the only time he survived was when he stared without blinking. Which one is true? I asked. All of them, he said, just not at the same time. He claimed skinwalkers weren't a species, not really. More like a habit the world picked up, a way fear teaches things how to wear us. According to him, they don't hunt people. They study us until we teach them how to be convincing. Every scream, every prayer, every desperate moment becomes a lesson. That's when he leaned closer and lowered his voice. The worst part, he said, is that you don't need to meet one to start changing. You just need to listen to the wrong stories in the wrong order. He told me about a man who memorized every rule and still disappeared. About a woman who broke every rule and lived, but never slept again. About a town that... I won't tell you the answers. There aren't any, at least not the kind that satisfy curiosity. Every detail you think you understand is only part of a reflection, a fragment shaped by attention. That's the rule no one writes down, the one that makes every story you've just heard feel like it started with you. Think carefully about what you noticed. Which story felt too familiar? Which word made your skin tighten? Which pattern made you glance around, half expecting something you didn't want to see? Comment if you have to, but frame it as a warning. Share what you saw, not what you think it means. The difference matters. Some of you will feel a chill reading this, a sense that being careful is already too late. Others will feel a quiet thrill, the kind that makes you replay details over and over, searching for confirmation that you aren't imagining it. Both reactions tell the same truth. Attention is currency. The moment you think you understand, the story has already begun shaping you. Don't look for closure. Don't ask for safety. Treat this as you would any unmarked file. Observe, respect the boundaries, and move on cautiously. Or don't. That choice is always part of it. And finally, if it comforts you to hear a voice telling you something safe, remember that comfort is the invitation. The safest line isn't a line at all. It's knowing you're part of something that doesn't need to end, and that you've already taken the first step by listening. This video isn't entertainment. Not really. It's a test. And if you're still here, it's already begun.